New Japan is back on tour this week with the Road to Dontaku shows moving through Osaka and Ehime. But a lot of the talk this week is about things that happened outside the ring, some of which may have spilled over into it. And not a lot of it is particularly pleasant. We've had some unseemly behavior and some pasts dug up that nobody would really like to go over too much again. But since it's something that spilled over into the ring, I think we're going to have to talk about it here. We're going to talk about the general state of wrestling as a whole. There was some news coming out of WrestleMania weekend that has brought a lot of concern to some people and some angst regarding Japanese wrestling and what the future could hold. So we also have some in-ring stuff. There was a show at Korakuen Hall last week, said farewell to Jeff Cobb, and there was drama about that too. So I feel like we're going into the gossip section a little bit this week, Jeremy, but I guess there's no other way to do it than to do it. So with Jeremy Finestone, I'm Steven Conway. This is Speaking of Strong Style. Welcome, everyone, to Speaking of Strong Style, where we discuss the news, issues, and events surrounding New Japan Pro Wrestling. And Jeremy, I hope you're doing well. It was an interesting weekend. We had a WrestleMania, maybe not a classic version of the WrestleMania there, but an interesting couple of days. A lot of news that came out of that could affect New Japan. But boy, it just feels like we were doing the Real Housewives of Pro Wrestling this week. Just a lot of gossip and some unseemly stuff to talk about here.
Hey, buddy. Yeah. No. This week sucked.
Yeah.
When you get up at the airport at 7 a.m. and you see you're just kind of gathering your things for Vegas, and you walk in the airport and you see Dave Meltzer. First thing he says to you, Hisashi Shimma died, and I said, "Yeah, so did the Pope." And then I grabbed my coffee and I sat down next to him, and I don't think we said another word for another 15 minutes.
Yeah. Well,
I've got metaphor for this entire week.
We're going to talk about Shinma. We're going to get into the Jeff Cobb stuff. We're going to get into the Shingo and Umino stuff. We're going to talk about some other things that are going on in...
Can we preview some matches?
Yeah, we can do that too, because we actually have a busy week. We're getting back to in-ring action, and it's going to be broadcast. So this week, I mentioned that they were in Osaka for 2 days in Ehime. Now, Ehime is the hometown of several wrestlers on the roster. They focused on Yuya Uemura. Uemura was kind of the hero of the night, got the pinfall at the end, did a big signing beforehand. That's Uemura territory. In Osaka, of course, a lot of the focus was on just preview tags. That's what this week was. It was preview tags. Those Osaka shows and the AMA shows not on NJPW World. Neither is tomorrow's show. But then we will get into 4 shows that will be broadcast on NJPW World. So when we come back here next Thursday, we will have quite a bit to talk about in the ring, plus a preview of Wrestling Dontaku. So things are going to pick up as far as watching the action goes, and that's nice. But you mentioned Shinma, and I wanted to get into that a little bit, because this is a pivotal figure in New Japan history who did not live his life in public all that much, and which is funny because he had a job description you would think would bring him in public quite a bit, but things were very different when he held the job. So I'll get to that. Hisashi Shimma, born 1935, so he was 90 years old when he passed this past week. He is one of the original employees of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Joined the company from the very beginning. In fact, joined it before they had their first show. Worked with Antonio Inoki in the New Japan office from the very formation of the company. And while Inoki was the owner, operator, and the big ideas guy, Shinma was kind of the man who made all the trains run on time. He was the details man in all of that, and he was a booker for the company and a critical one. And it was basically a guy that would cross all the T's and dot all the I's. And so we don't know a ton about the man. He didn't, like I said, he was fairly private, but Inoki had final say, but Shinma was the booker. Shinma was the one who made the vision happen. And in the late 70s and early 80s, there were a lot of very pivotal decisions that Shinma was a big part of. And so while they don't necessarily write down who does exactly what behind the scenes there, Shinma is generally credited with giving the Tiger Mask gimmick to Satoru Sayama. So they knew they had licensed this character, and he had been a cartoon character in Japan before it was ever a pro wrestler. And it was about a wrestler. I mean, it was a cartoon about a wrestler, and they decided to bring it actually to life. He gave the gimmick to Satoru Sayama. Now, that was one of the most important decisions in the history of wrestling. And I say that without any kind of exaggeration, because Tiger Mask changed the entire wrestling industry's idea of who could be a main event star. Even Mexico, which we think of as a place for the high flyers and the smaller guys, they favored, for the most part, bigger guys, with some exceptions, before Tiger Mask proved to be such a draw. Certainly in Japan, we talked on this show here about how Gran Hamada and Black Cat basically had to leave Japan in order to become major stars because they were simply too small. Tiger Mask changed all of that when he and Dynamite Kid kind of blew the world away with their with the action and the speed and some of the moves that nobody had seen before. It was something that opened up a whole new field of research. New Japan's kind of known for its junior heavyweight division, going through Tiger Mask up through Jushin Thunder Liger, one of the greatest of all time, all the way through the guys like Koji Kanemoto and Shinjiro Otani and many more that I don't have time to mention before we got to Kushida Hiromu. None of that happens without him. I don't think Rey Mysterio happens without Tiger Mask, which means Rey Mysterio doesn't happen without Shinma, because he's the one that gave this talented but small guy, who probably wouldn't gotten a crack at it otherwise, the ball and let him run with it. And then book them strong. Tiger Mask wasn't always the main event, but often he closed the first half of the show. He was the last thing you would see before intermission, which in a lot of ways is the second most important spot on the show. Mm-hmm. And kind of sends everybody off into the break there. And then the heavyweights would come in later. That's kind of a spot Liger took as well. So critically important there. Another thing that Shinma did while he was in charge of New Japan's creative, so to speak, was working with the WWF and creating that relationship. Now, we mentioned before, at the time in Japan, there were 3 major promotions coming after the split. So you had the JWA, which is where Baba and Inoki worked before they formed their own companies. That company kind of shriveled up pretty quickly. You can't lose both Baba and Inoki, and both of them take a whole slew of guys with them to create their own companies. It wasn't much left. So that company shriveled up. But before that, there was a company called IWE, International Wrestling Enterprises, which was also kind of thriving in Japan. So for a while, Baba had all the ties with the NWA. He was in with the Funks. And so he had the NWA as the governing body, so to speak, over all Japan. So the NWA champion would come in, he would wrestle in all Japan. New Japan was sometimes an NWA member as well, but they could never really get dates on the champion all that much. The IWE worked with the AWA. So what was that? What was left? Well, the WWF was left. Shinma helped put together that deal. And in the late 70s, we talked about how the tournament, what we now know as the G1, was called the Madison Square Garden Series. And then it was heavily tied with the idea of MSG, and Inoki wrestled in Madison Square Garden. Tatsumi Fujinami, Tiger Mask, those guys would go over and wrestle at MSG, and it would give them some international credibility. The stars coming over would be people affiliated often with the WWF. A lot of their foreigners came from that relationship. Bob Backlund would come over and be a foreign babyface in New Japan when he was the WWF champion. And a lot of those menacing heels that were chasing Backlund would also come over and work for New Japan as gaijin heels. So that would be a very fruitful relationship for New Japan, give them a lot of cred there. When they would see the NWA champion on one channel, you could flip and still see big stars from the United States there. It didn't look like New Japan had been left behind. And it ended up being pretty important. Really, it was how Hulk Hogan got there. And Hulk Hogan turned out to be one of the most important foreigners in the history of
He always seems to have that effect, doesn't he?
Well, Hogan was a big heel for the WWF at the time. It was before he had switched babyface in the AWA. And it was around the same time. But he had a big run in the WWF in 1981, feuded with Andre the Giant, Tony Atlas, a little bit like that. And then he started getting booked for New Japan not long after that. And then Vern got him and went to the AWA and turned him into the biggest babyface in the world. But I'm simplifying that quite a bit, but you get the idea. I mean,
Yeah.
like a lot of
Look at the bullet points.
And so the WWF even made him the figurehead president of the World Wrestling Federation. So back before it was Jack Tunney, that was the guy when I was a kid, right? Jack Tunney was the president of the WWF. And whenever there was some sort of controversial decision going on, you would hear from Jack Tunney. But other than that, he was just kind of this name that you heard of that was the in charge of the wrestling. He was the commissioner, so to speak. Well, before it was Jack Tunney, it was Shinma. And so if there was some sort of strange thing going on with the titles, will the titles have to be held up? Did the heel actually steal it, or are they going to have a rematch? That type of stuff. It was Shinma, so to speak, who would come down from the
arbiter of justice in the wrestling.
Yeah, because they couldn't say that. Well, it's Vince, right? Because Vince, they didn't want to say that the promoter was Vince's father back then, the current Vince's father. You didn't want to say that the promoter was the guy in charge of the decisions. Those were supposed to be two different jobs in the kayfabe era. So they would use Shinma as the WWF president. Another thing about Shinma too is he felt the need to create a governing body within New Japan. Mm-hmm. Interesting point that New Japan didn't have its own heavyweight title until the 1980s. So Inoki kind of used the NWF, which was a company that ran around the Eastern Great Lakes. So Buffalo, Cleveland, and around and the cities around Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, and stuff like that. It was this company that ran that area in the 70s. And they had varying degrees of success. Sometimes it was hot, sometimes it was cold, the way all territories were. But when it was in trouble, Inoki brokered a deal to kind of take the NWF belt, and he came to Japan that he had won this major title in the United States, and that was the title he defended in New Japan, the NWF title. He also they created a World Martial Arts title for Inoki to defend, and so, but there really wasn't a New Japan heavyweight title. All Japan had the Pacific Wrestling Federation title, but nobody really had a belt. So he came up with the idea, or at least advocated the idea. If he didn't come up with it, he pushed for it. The idea of creating an IWGP, International Wrestling Grand Prix. And at first it was the name for the tournament. It was a Madison Square Garden series, then it was something else. And then the IWGP was the tournament we now know as the G1. He pushed before he left. This was not long before he left the company, to make an IWGP be the governing body of New Japan, and that there would be a title called the IWGP title. And that took a while to get done. For a while, it was just a tournament, but and not a belt to be defended. Hulk Hogan won the first International Wrestling Grand Prix tournament, but he didn't get a belt and make defenses the rest of the year. That didn't come until later. Shinma ended up leaving the company in 1983, and he formed the UWF, the first version of it. There were a couple of attempts at UWFs over the years. UWF attempted to portray themselves as a shoot-style promotion, so more realistic, they felt. Look, if you watch it now and you know what UFC looks like, it doesn't look all that realistic, but they wanted to make it look a little bit more like a real fight. What they thought MMA might look like if there was MMA, and there only kind of was back then. But it was a big success for a while, and it was a hit. So Shinma was involved in that, and at first, and there were other iterations of the UWF that would come and go over the years. It's another story for another day. But that was why he left New Japan, and he was involved in other promotions for years and years after. And in the end, just a very influential guy in the history of New Japan. There from the very beginning, helped make it what it became. Got it into the 80s, and passed away at the age of 90 this past week. So that's some facts about Shinma.
A full and influential life.
Yeah, he really was. And so, I just
think about stuff like the Super J Cup probably never would have happened without him.
Oh, certainly not. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, seriously, Tiger Mask changed
Jericho,
everything.
Never would have been anything. Eventually, yes, they would have, but their pathway would have been much different.
Yeah, you wonder who, if not him, who? Because the thing about Sayama is he just wrestled differently. And he had Dynamite Kid as his rival. I don't think that happens without Dynamite either, because Dynamite could do things that nobody else could do. And so having those two against each other, and they blew the crowd away at Madison Square Garden, who didn't know who either one of these guys were. And in the end, they were just like, oh my God. And you think like New York crowds feel like they've seen everything, even if they haven't, but they can be kind of a jaded group. And that match kind of turned everybody's heads.
Do you think that guys like Tiger Mask were undeniable and eventually somebody would have figured it out if it's not him and he was just smart enough to be the first guy to figure it out? Or he fundamentally changed everything because they never would have been discovered?
Somebody needed to advocate for smaller wrestlers. And Shinma was willing to do it for Sayama. He thought that Sayama was the right guy, and the Tiger Mask needed to be a flying guy because, he was agile and things like that in the comic book, in the cartoon show. It's a cartoon show. And he just felt like it needed something different. There have been masked wrestlers, plenty of them over the years in Japan. The Destroyer, for heaven's sakes, is a cultural icon in Japan. So that wasn't unusual. Having a guy in a hood wasn't strange. It's just that he wanted somebody who wrestled different than everybody else. And already very, very talented guys, like we mentioned, Hamada, Black Cat, had not done anything outside of the ordinary in New Japan and had to go to Mexico to become stars. Mexico would become, Mexico probably would have been it then. That's probably would have been ground zero for smaller guys in wrestling. That probably would have been it. But I think Tiger Mask smoothed the path because they just saw if you get the right guy, they can draw money on top. They can. Yeah. And Jeremy Orr, how was Gotch in Japanese wrestling? Well, Karl Gotch he's considered one of the gods of Japanese wrestling. He's one of the most influential foreign wrestlers they had. And he was toward the end of his in-ring career when New Japan formed. But the fact that he and guys like Lou Thesz, also on the tail end side of his career, regular ring career. Thesz wrestled matches a lot longer, and he would have said this. I wrestled longer than I should have. Like he did a match in the 70s when he was in his 70s, and he said it was an embarrassment. It was. But in the late 70s, Gotch and Thesz were on the tail end of their headlining careers and things, but they lent credibility to New Japan by coming over with Inoki. So Gotch was very, very important and trained a lot of guys. A lot of people were trained by Karl Gotch. And I think that was probably as much of an influence as him in the ring was the people he trained over there. So Gotch is one of the foreign gods of pro wrestling, the Destroyer, Gotch, I suppose the Sharp brothers, if you want to go all the way back, Freddie Blassie for sure. Fred Blassie, one of Riki Dozan's big rivals. So those guys are kind of mythical within Japanese wrestling history. So, and Shinma was part of that. He was booking those guys. So there you have it.
And hello to Jeremy Orr and Colin Matthew, who are both in the chat right now. Jeremy Orr with the question, hot off the gate. So we got that. We also have created a Facebook page, and it is early in its infancy. So if you are listening to this and you want to give us the like and subscribe to that, because frankly speaking, it's like a snake feeding it on its own tail on Facebook. You have to like and subscribe for it to get bigger in the algorithm. And it's 2025, and I'm deciding to open up a Facebook page for Speaking Strong Style. So
okay, Boomer,
by me, really ahead of the social media curve here. But frankly speaking, there's only so much that you can do with X right now, and Blue Sky. People respond through Blue Sky, and I post the stuff on Reddit, but I want to get this show in more people's attention span, and so if you are able to help advocate for us, because we do not spend money on advertisement, we don't do anything like that. It is strictly a word of mouth kind of podcast, and anything that you can do as you're listening to this to like and subscribe wherever you see the Speaking of Strong Style brand in the bottom corner of the screen or with our podcast feeds, man, we would thank you so much.
You know what else Shinma was in on real quick? He was also in on putting together the Inoki Ali fight, the famous Antonio Inoki Muhammad Ali fight. He was instrumental in getting that deal done, which for better or for worse, happened. That was it's kind of one of the biggest disasters ever. But nowhere, nothing could have made Antonio Inoki more of a household name in Japan, or more than that. I mean, for having a real fight with Muhammad Ali, the fight itself was an absolute disaster. The publicity was probably utterly invaluable to New Japan. So he was part of putting that whole fiasco together, although he didn't know it was supposed to be. Do you remember what the original idea was for that one, Jeremy?
I don't. Remind me.
Ali was supposed to lose to Inoki when there was a controversy about, and I'm trying to remember how it was supposed to go. Ali was supposed to be distracted by something going on. Like there was a question about the rules, or it was a mixed martial arts match, boxer versus wrestler, right? And it was supposed to be a work. Something was supposed to happen where Ali was distracted by something, whether it was a doctor or it was, I don't know if they ever even ironed this totally out, what it was going to be, but he was going to be distracted by some sort of official. And he was going to take his eye off Inoki, and Inoki was going to hit him with basically an enzugiri and flatten him. And Ali could just come out of that and protect Ali by saying, well, it was a cheap shot and I didn't see it coming. And then, but Inoki was supposed to get his hand raised. They had paid Ali to come over there and lose to Inoki, was the whole thing, in a worked boxer versus wrestler fight. Last second, Ali decides, I don't want to lose. And there's not a whole lot Inoki could do about that fact if he decided he wasn't going to. Inoki had some martial arts training, not as much as he said he did. But he had some training, but probably not enough to take out Muhammad Ali. So in the end, they just decided, they could not come to any agreement. But it was all there. The fans were in the stands. The people were watching closed circuit around the world. So they just decided, we'll just go in and have a fight. We're just going to fight. Now, Inoki was smart enough not to try to box Ali. Ali was smart enough not to wrestle with Inoki. So the only thing they could really do was Inoki laid down on the ground and tried to up kick him. And Muhammad Ali tried to figure out how to punch a guy that he didn't want to get close to for 15 rounds. And basically, in the end, they declared it a draw because they couldn't pick a winner. Nothing had happened. So it was a wreck.
Did they wreck Muhammad Ali's legs for the future?
Yeah, it did a lot of damage because he kicked the living crap out of Ali's legs. Yeah, he was in pain. Some of that is a little bit exaggerated by the people who were on Inoki's side of the whole thing.
Sure.
I don't think he was in a wheelchair for a while, like they said. Yeah, but I mean, he kicked the crap out of Ali's legs. Just nothing really happened. Jeremy's asking, how has WWE been received in Japan over the years? They've had some events that have done well. It's seen similarly to how New Japan is seen here, that just like here, there's us, those of us who are interested in this niche of a niche, right? It's like not just pro wrestling, which is its own niche, but Japanese pro wrestling. There are fans in Japan who are really into American wrestling. And it's kind of edgy for the American wrestling. You'll see people with American wrestling shirts in Japan. And you're kind of just like when you see people with New Japan stuff here, you're like, oh, my tribe is here. That type of stuff. It's kind of a cult following. And when WWE goes over there, they do all right, and people want the WWE experience. And I want to feel like I'm at a US based show. And I think that's similar to how when we go to a New Japan show, we kind of want that. We want the Japanese style entrances and all that stuff. So it has a cult following over there. They have run some big events. They've run some things in the Dome when they've worked with other companies. There have been WWF world title matches in Tokyo Dome cards that aren't only WWF events and things like that. So certainly has a big reputation there. Bruno Sammartino was a big star for the JWA and wrestling with Baba, and he stayed loyal to All Japan, even though he was with the WWF. He didn't work for Inoki. He stayed with Baba. But certainly guys like Hogan, like Backlund, Hogan even did a tour with New Japan after he was in the WWF. And Bret Hart went with him because Bret had a history of wrestling with Tiger Mask. And Iron Mike Sharp, whose father and uncle, the Sharp brothers, were huge stars in Japan. So it's always been interwoven with New Japan, and it's always been treated with respect. And people in Japan certainly know that the WWE is the biggest company in the world in that regard. So they know that, and so it has that kind of a following on the side. And he says he knew, and Jeremy says he knew the NWA was big. Yeah. In the 70s, especially, that was the most respected world heavyweight title that toured. And it was always kind of it was always a very important thing when the NWA champion would tour with All Japan. And a couple of times Baba won the title. They would do a thing where Baba would win the title at the beginning of a tour.
Yeah.
He would go around the horn with it and then lose it back. And then the champion would come back to the United States. Sometimes they would tell everybody he'd lost it and regained it. Sometimes they did. Just depend on how kayfabe they wanted to be about the whole thing. And there was a lot of that. Inoki, for instance, won the WWF title. And that wasn't recognized by the WWF in the United States until fairly recently. So, the NWA was a very big deal as well, just with All Japan, whereas the WWF stuff was a New Japan thing.
You want to know how it's going to be a weird show, Steven?
That we've been talking about this for 25 minutes?
That we've been talking about this, and theoretically, it's a highlight of the show, given the gutter talk we're going to have to go into because of, adults not managing to be professional in any way, shape, or form in this business. You ready to go for this? Are you ready? Are you really ready for this?
Well, let's billboard some other stuff too. But yes, The answer is I've been trying to avoid this. I'm procrastinating. Here's the thing, guys. Later on, we are going to go over the schedule up ahead. There's really good stuff in the ring coming up this week. We are going to go over it and talk about it. And we are going to talk about some of the other things that are going on in pro wrestling. I think that the WWE's acquisition of AAA has put some things in the zeitgeist out there, and people are feeling a little anxious. We're going to address some of that as well. But let's just go ahead and
I'm annoyed that we have to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, I am too. So let's start with Cobb. So Jeff Cobb had his final match with New Japan on Friday. It was Friday night, Saturday morning, rare 11:30 a.m. show. He did a match with Tanahashi. It was fine. Yeah, exactly. It was fine.
Nobody trying to get hurt in this match.
No.
You know what I mean? Like it was. I went to Vegas for a WrestleMania to watch the shows and.
Yeah, I want to hear about your week too, and
we're going to get to that. But I watched a lot of matches, or like a few matches, and talked about a lot of matches and saw them on screen. This match was exactly like those exhibition matches. It was show up, don't get hurt, and get out of there in 10 minutes. That was what this match was.
Yeah, and Tanahashi won because Cobb's on the way out. Mm-hmm. And so afterwards...
Good finish.
What's that?
Good finish. The tour of the island, could do a roll-up. Can't book it much better than that.
No, it was fine. Yeah, no, it was fine. And protected Cobb to an extent. He didn't just like take a finisher and then leave and then, but afterwards, Cobb said some very nice words, very gracious. You could tell that he was emotional about leaving New Japan. Been there for 8 years.
He was crying going into the ring. He was crying after the match. He was in his feelings. It was a nice moment.
And afterwards, he thanked all the people that were there with him in the United Empire, which shouldn't be a bone of contention, but ended up being.
Apparently.
And so Jacob Austin Young, Callum Newman, Great O'Khan, those were the guys that were out there. Akira, Francesco Akira. I knew there was one more. And he thanked each one of them, which you would imagine he would.
Templario was there too.
Templario was there too. Pardon me. So
I knew there were 5. So in my mind, I was like, who were the photographing over?
Point being, that is who he thanked. The people that were in the ring with him. And he had a little post that had a picture of the people that were in the ring with him, and he mentioned those. Now, I don't think there's anything crazy about that. Those are the people that were in the ring at his farewell. There was a photo on Twitter, all that kind of stuff. And apparently there was a moment on some, I don't know if it was at a show or something like that, where a fan said something like TJP, because he was the captain of, remember we went through this whole thing with the United Empire. TJP's the captain. That TJP had led United Empire to glory, and Cobb kind of laughed about it a little bit. Not a huge cackle, not a big thing, but I mean, look, TJP, this is the booking. I'm talking about the booking now. TJP was booked to be, I'm the captain of New Japan now. Then United Empire went through a slump, was booked into a slump. They lost most of their big matches. They didn't succeed. Frankly, it seems like every time United Empire came up, they didn't do well in tournaments. They didn't do that well with titles. They lost them. It wasn't a strong run for United Empire. You know how New Japan likes to tear a faction down before they build them back up again. And they just won. Great O'Khan just won the TV title, and we have the tag titles back in, and all this kind of stuff going on. Now they have belts again, but for a long time they weren't successful. And apparently TJP objected to Cobb's reaction to that and mentioned some things on Twitter. Can you take it from here a little bit, Jeremy? I feel icky already, and we haven't even gotten to the ugly stuff.
So, not only what you mentioned, but because TJP was omitted in both the social media post and Jeff Cobb's personal comments in the ring after the show, TJP's a freelancer. He's not at the show. No one would ever have known that there were issues between these two individuals if TJP hadn't gone onto social media and accused Jeff Cobb of being passive-aggressive on his way out and then escalating everything to an unnecessary degree as a result of Jeff Cobb just basically wiping the dust off his shoulder like he was above all of it. Because he was. This was his goodbye. This was him out the door. He didn't engage with anything. And then I believe it was Sunday night, WrestleMania weekend. I believe TJ, Aria Perkins are in Vegas, not too far from where I'm at. And, they proceed to unleash a storm on social media, which when I say that there were multiple posts in which they told Jeff Cobb that he was fat, to say the least, other F words in terms of that, to say the least. And then at the very worst, completely inexcusable, they told him multiple times to unalive himself, which I know that TJP is a freelancer. I know that he is doing his own thing, but I don't think TJP is going to have a job anywhere significant anytime soon. He screwed his way out of a job at WWE. He screwed his way a job out of AEW. He's likely screwing his way out of a job in New Japan Pro Wrestling. There's no way they can bring this guy back at this point. This is really bad stuff.
He's scheduled for resurgence right now.
I would be surprised if he would have a whole lot of dates after resurgence. Maybe they'll see it through, but I don't even think TJP is going to be prepared for the reaction he's going to get at resurgence.
Yeah, it's ugly stuff. Like you mentioned, the stuff about the steroids and all this stuff. It was nasty and it was unnecessary. And Cobb just mentioned like, hey, dude, you said yourself, and he did. He said at the Wrestle Kingdom, Wrestle Dynasty pressers that he wasn't going to be around as much, and TJP did wish Akira good luck and told him to go on, but on camera it was fine until now, like everything was okay. And so this whole thing kind of airing dirty laundry in public was
let's run this back and make it very, very clear. TJP and his family told this man to unalive himself because he was not appreciated for his contribution to the faction that they were in together. That is insane behavior for a grown adult.
Yeah, and it just left a really nasty taste in the mouth of everybody right there. So, I was in the I was reading this, and Dave Elker and Brian Alvarez were recording Wrestling Observer Radio after WrestleMania, and they finished. And I walked into the room, and I said, "TJP is going to get fired." And they looked at me and was like, what? It's like, he is saying some unbelievable stuff on social media. And they looked at it and they read it. And Brian Alvarez laughed in disbelief. He did what the hell? Yeah. And then Dave's like, oh, he's going to get fired. So you can't say these things. I don't even think they've apologized. I don't even know if they're on social media. I think they might have gone dark on social media. The tweets have been the tweets that mention steroids and dying and all that kind of stuff have been taken down. They deleted those at least, and they were on his wife's Twitter feed, all that stuff.
But they were endorsed by TJP with active likes and all that stuff. So he saw them and he at least agreed with them in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it was pretty nasty. And like you said, none of this was public.
Didn't have to be.
No,
you can't trust this guy in any promotion or in any locker room at this point because he's toxic. He can completely he's toxic now. He has to get help in order to be able to cooperate with other people.
And he mentioned on answering a tweet, I believe it was a tweet from the Super J Cast, another New Japan related podcast, saying that he was the after 3 guys had turned down the leadership job of UE. This is what TJP wrote to them. After 3 guys turned down the leadership job in United Empire, he did the best he could. And then one of the people that turned it down, obviously meaning Cobb, rode the other direction, meaning ROWED, the other direction for an entire year. So some of the dirty laundry coming out is apparently these guys hadn't gotten along for a while, and TJP felt that after they had said they didn't want to be the leader, he ended up being the leader, and then they tried to undermine him as the leader. I didn't see a ton of that. What I did see was not everybody in United Empire necessarily backing up TJP the way the other factions backed up their leader. We thought that was the story. Remember, we talked on this show, like, these guys don't seem sure that TJP is the right guy. And it was almost part of the story, but it wasn't only Cobb. It wasn't only Cobb that did that. And so it's strange, but it does sound like there were elements of real life in that.
There's absolutely elements of real life in there. If TJP is going in there and saying, well, 3 other guys didn't want the job, so I stepped up into the role and they didn't like it that I did, maybe you're not a good leader. Maybe there wasn't leadership material in that faction at that time. Maybe the other guys didn't want to lead and maybe you thought you would be the best guy, but that doesn't mean you're the best guy. It means you're the only guy willing to try, but you may not still have the qualifications. If they didn't respect you and they didn't think that you were the leader, as much as you try to do so, you are lacking the leadership qualities, and that's on you. It is not on other people. If they don't believe that you are a leader and they are hard workers, that they have to follow you, especially in a wrestling business where you have to work by respect.
But I mean, if they book, it's booking though. So if they say that TJP is the leader, then they probably should at least kayfabe get behind the leader.
I think TJP called himself the leader, and nobody else. I don't even think the company even called him the leader. They didn't book him like a leader. They booked Great O'Khan as a better competitor in the entire year last year when TJP called himself a leader, and that's not how any faction works. It was self-appointed. Everything about this, we don't know that self-appointed. We don't know that New Japan didn't come up to TJP and said, and we don't know that when he said he was the captain, that wasn't New Japan's telling him. Everything that TJP has said up to this point has been delusional.
Remember, he has
lost credibility with me by what he has said and the way he has gone about sharing information and saying information that is clearly not true. And then,
but he was saying stuff in backstage comments that's usually kayfabe stuff. So I'd imagine that, and it was going on for months. If he said, "I'm the captain of United Empire," and the bookers like Geto, Tanahashi, and the whole crew over there were like, "No, you're not. What are you talking about?" I don't think that would have gone on for months. And it did.
It wasn't a priority. I'm sure that they didn't realize how this was escalating. But United Empire wasn't exactly the biggest priority in any bit of New Japan. The Gaijin promotion that they were focusing on was TMDK for the entirety of the time that Will Ospreay had left. As much as I wanted to say that TJP had momentum and shock throughout the year, every time they put him in a position, he lost, and he lost badly. If there's a story that he wanted to be a leader, the story was he was a bad leader, both in kayfabe and in reality. In that case,
it does seem like there was underlying heat the whole time there. And Hassan Albana mentions it. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He said, "Why Jeff Cobb laugh at TJP?" He brought it up first, and I mean, yes, he did. I don't know if any of this happens without that, but I think that was just kind of an offhand little thing. The point is the incredible overreaction of TJP to all that was way out of way out of line. You can disagree with booking. You can say that somebody was trying to undermine what you were doing. When you get into the territory they got into, there is no excuse for accusing somebody of things like that and telling them to go die. That's just no. There's no.
The reality is, I've been in situations where I've tried to position myself to be a leader among other people, and when I was in that position, I realized I wasn't good at it. Like there are strengths that I have, like I could contribute to a team, like the mentality of that. But as I've gotten older, I do not have the skills to be a leader of a team in accomplishing goals on a long-term basis. And, it's okay if TJP is not a leader. It's not okay if he tells everyone else that he is and treats them like crap in order to convince everyone that he is, or give him more time, or give whatever. That's not what a leader does.
And Hassan also mentions here, United Empire should have dissolved after Ospreay. He said, from the little I watched, I thought they are creating a story where TJP is the crazy man who thinks he's a leader. I don't blame you for thinking that might have been the angle. After Ospreay left, it was rudderless for quite a while, and maybe only until the last couple of months or so do we see any direction for United Empire after that. And that was about a year there where nothing was really going on. Ospreay was obviously the glue that held it together. It's a fair point that maybe the idea was, I think, we were going to create an empire modeled on the sun never sets on the British Empire, right? So we have a guy from Italy. We have a guy from New Zealand. We have a guy from Japan. We have, other guys from all over the world. Cobb from the United States, Hawaii, that type of thing. The sun never sets on the United Empire. And that was the hook, I think, for a little bit there. But it did seem rudderless for the last year. And maybe the smart thing to do, now that we know what we know, after Ospreay left, and maybe just kind of figure out something else rather than try to make this continue on.
I think what I find most amazing out of all of this is pro wrestling, and I think you'll agree with me on this, is an inherently selfish business. You are looking out for yourself. There is no one that is going to help you make more money than you are going to make more money than yourself. It's you first, everyone else. With that said, the fact that TJP came off so selfish and self-serving to take this time in which it was Jeff Cobb's time to say goodbye. He had a lovely entrance match exit with Hiroshi Tanahashi. He got to say what he wanted to say on his way out. And the jealousy and the selfishness of TJP, in which he felt like he did not get the same kind of respect from Jeff Cobb on the way out, or he made it about him in any way, shape, or form, when it wasn't about him. Nothing about any of this was about TJP. Should tell you everything you need to know about TJP going forward.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens with that. He is still scheduled for resurgence as of now, but who knows what will happen going forward from it. And Cobb seems like he's off to WWE land eventually, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But I have a feeling the Cobb is kind of done with the whole thing for now.
I think ain't gonna bother me. So let me ask you this: the other one that we got funny stuff business about, shooting or kayfabe?
A mix of both. And I know that that's an easy answer. They just say, hey, both, and then you can't be wrong, right? But
yeah. We're talking about Shingo Takagi and Shota Umino.
Yeah. And I think it was a work that maybe steamed off Shingo a little bit, is the whole thing. So what let's go into this.
They've invoked a 2009 Dragon Gate controversy.
Yeah,
I'm going to give it to you from here.
Yeah, I don't want it. What happened was Twitter war stuff, but kayfabe Twitter war stuff. They're trying to build their match. Which is coming up at Dontaku. And I don't remember what Shingo wrote to, but it was just general, like, hey, I'm going to bust you back to Young Lion. You're going to shave your head again. He said that in backstage comments. Totally kayfabe.
He posted a picture of Shota with the crying face and the tears.
Yeah, I'm going to bust you all the way back to it and things like that. Shota decided to say that, what is it? I don't know if you want to bring up things from the past and then put the monkey emoji on it. Now, I have thought a lot this week of how much I want to talk about this because I didn't know a lot about this until this week. Maybe shocked to hear I wasn't following the ins and outs of Dragon Gate in 2009 all that much. There was a scandal within Dragon Gate. The police were involved. It was enough for that. One of the wrestlers, Sima, had a pet monkey and brought it and it lived at the Dragon Gate dojo. That monkey this monkey seems to have been badly abused while it was there. And whatever I'm not going to go over details. Unfortunately, it's out there. Whatever you think, it's probably worse. It's sickening. Absolutely sickening what happened to this with this poor animal.
Much desensitized myself from, like, I read it and it was like a clinical rereading. I have not been able to emotively associate with it.
And what can you say? But Shingo was there, and the best case scenario is that Shingo knew this was happening to this poor animal and did nothing. The preponderance of the evidence is that his involvement was not the bare minimum. I'm going to leave it there. It's awful. It has changed the way I look at Shingo Takagi as a person and as one of my favorite wrestlers. And I've had a difficult time with this, and you will too when you see some of this stuff. Yeah. Shingo decided to bring it up in this thing.
No,
Shota decided to bring it up in this thing. Yes, I got my SHs mixed up. And there were a couple of days there where they didn't have a show because it came out kind of after the Korakuen Hall show. This footage is on NJPW World. They've been putting up, I like this. They've been putting up little 8-minute little highlight bits from house shows there. And it showed Shingo Takagi absolutely. And we all know what a New Japan chair shot looks like, right? We've kind of been conditioned to what a chair shot looks like in New Japan. Shingo absolutely frickin' smokes Shota Umino with a chair. Swinging this thing hard on his back, across the shoulder blades, as safe as you can do a chair shot. Then he takes the thing, though, and as Shota is bent over and kind of turning to see what Shingo's doing next, he throws it at Shota's head. Just throws it right at his face, like this chair. It's noticeably stiffer and with a little more intent than the stuff we usually see, even when people are fighting in the crowd, even during the War Dogs, House of Torture. It looks different than that. It looked like a receipt. It looked like Shingo was pissed off that this was brought up. And I wish it hadn't. I certainly wish it hadn't, because I wish I had never gone back and found out what the deal was. Akira Tozawa from WWE, by the way, was in on this too. And it was so I don't know what's going to happen at Dontaku when these two wrestle each other, but the rest of the house shows, the other stuff from Osaka and Ehime, we also saw clips of that too, and that looked professional to me, although pretty stiff. Like some of those forearms had a little more steam on them than they often do. Shota especially, I think, sometimes pushes the arm into the neck more than hits, and they were hitting when they're so. Work shoot, I think that's the right term for it. I think what has happened is here they decided to really play this up that they're angry at each other.
Charlotte and Tiffany.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, right? There's just an epidemic, of a little bit of semi-professional behavior going on in wrestling right now, where people just are kind of losing their minds in the middle of things.
So disappointing on both ends. Yeah. Jeremy, we are going to recap all that stuff. We didn't want to have to talk about this, but we just got to get it out of the way, because
it's in the
got to have a responsibility to have an opinion about it, which is I'm disappointed in Shingo. I'm disappointed in Shota. I'm disappointed that Shota is invoking stuff that has no need to be brought up in order to get heat as a wrestler, because nothing else has worked. It is getting desperate, and I'm disappointed in New Japan for allowing this to go forward. I'm disappointed in Shingo for participating in this behavior. I was somewhat aware of it in the past, but, we live in a world where gnarly stuff happens every day, and you get desensitized about it every day. The pro wrestling community sometimes can be gnarly, and you are reminded about it every single day. The TJP stuff almost completely overshadowed this. Had it been a couple of days apart, could have been forgotten about completely. Unfortunately, it wasn't. But this is all disappointing for the roster of New Japan Pro Wrestling. I do not like it when I have to look at grown adults and wonder why they can't act like the adults in the room. Shota Umino, for all intents and purposes, he's got to be better about this stuff. Like, trying to find the spark in order to get a connection with the fans. It's getting more and more desperate with each attempt. And maybe this is storyline. Maybe this is all building towards something. Maybe they're just trying to add a little bit of real when they're trying to create permanent change within the promotion, and this is leading to something greater. Maybe, but there's still stink to it that I don't like. And it's taking away from a lot of really great momentum in the promotion right now. And the good stuff that's happened in the last couple of months in New Japan feels so far in the rearview mirror when you have to talk about stuff like this that I just want everyone to grow up.
Yeah, I know, Jeremy. The thing, a monkey's not about wrestling, but it was brought up, and the thing is, if it directs people to figure out what had happened in 2009, it's pretty revolting. And
it should have been revolting in 2009. It got overlooked,
and people, Dragon's Gate punished a couple of like mid carders and low card guys and stayed away from the main eventers.
It's clear that Shingo skirted accountability on this, and people skirt accountability on shit.
Yeah, the whole thing is like, if this is how you're trying to build heat for the match, I think the only thing you're doing is turning people off of it.
Yes.
If they look into this, like, what is he talking about with the monkey? And then you look at it and you're like, it doesn't make you want to see the match more. It makes you want to just say, I don't want to have anything to do with these guys.
This is bad booking, and this is bad storytelling, and this is a self-inflicted wound. And this is not helping Shota Umino in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. All right. So with that, hopefully it won't spill over into the ring. These guys will be a little bit more professional going forward. But Tanahashi needs to get a hold of his damn locker room. The TJP thing in Cobb, neither one of them work for him anymore. So there you go. Yeah. I guess it's just them.
That problem fixed itself.
Well, anyway, we had that Cobb and Tanahashi thing, by the way, was about the only notable thing that happened during that Korakuen Hall show last week.
The post-match on the elimination in the main was fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it was a bad show. I'm just saying it wasn't a whole lot of consequence. It was a house show.
I watched the whole thing, and I agree with you. That was the only thing worth a damn.
Yeah, I mean, there was. Yeah, that was about it. The rest of it was just the standard preview tags. So let's look forward, because this weekend, by the way, I want to mention something that's coming up this weekend. The schedule coming up. So we have Friday in Kochi. New Japan will be in Kochi on Friday. That's not on NJPW World. That's a house show. We're back with 4 shows after that, though. Saturday, Wrestling Red Zone in Hiroshima at the Sun Plaza Hall. That card is mostly previews, but there are a couple of them that are interesting. You're going to have Uemura and Umino teaming up against Shingo and Tsuji. That should be an interesting tag match. And then Hiromu and Naito are facing Taichi and Ishii, which is kind of cool. And then the main event will be Bishamon against Great Okan and Callum Newman.
I got a feeling that I don't know. I don't think the Goto is going to be a double champ. Just get that feeling.
No, and that's not a tag. Is that a title match?
I think it's for the vacant titles.
Oh yeah, okay, all right, it might well be. Let's see. Then Sunday, April 27th on NJPW World. I'll have to look that up there. Sorry about that. In Yamaguchi, that is on that one's on NJPW World. It's all tags and previews. So that's a basic house show that's going to be on NJPW World. Tuesday, April 29th, much bigger show. Heisen no Kuni in Saga. And this one has a bunch of it. First of all, Masatori Yatsuda is getting his match against Hiroshi Tanahashi. So that's going to be that. The Young Lion match with Tanahashi gets a singles match. That is long delayed because of Yasuda's injuries, but he's back. Then we will have previews with a 10-man tag team between the War Dogs and House of Torture. So something to look out for there. TV title match with Great Khan defending against El Phantasmo in a rematch. The junior tag team titles will be on the line as Fujita and Eagles face Yo and Master Wato. And the junior heavyweight title will be on the line, Desperado versus Templario. So, on paper right there, Jeremy, Heisen no Kuni looks like a hell of a card.
Yeah, I agree. The 26th, it is a decider match, Bishamon, for the IW Tag Team Championship.
Got it. All right, there you go. So, yeah, I would say United Empire. Well, I guess someone's going to be a double champ in there, aren't they?
Yeah. I guess TJP is not really available for that match.
Yeah. Well, you have Great Khan as a television champion and Callum Newman, and then Bishamon, of course, has the world title in it with Goto.
Who would you put the belt on?
I don't. I hate to say this, but I don't think the heavyweight tag team titles matter much in this company. So
no,
you kind of caught me off guard with that one because I just thought, boy, I can't make a particularly compelling case for either one.
I think if they're going to continue with business as usual, you just flip Great Khan in for Cobb and you keep them as the tag champions.
Because you wouldn't want Goto taking any losses with the tag team and yeah.
I mean, Goto's not doing jobs right now. Like
certainly not to be Yoshihashi.
And if he's doing a job, it's to set up like a title match.
I could see Newman pinning him to get steam up for the Dontaku.
Yeah, win pin Goto, win a title, and then set the momentum for the title match on the 4th. Sure.
Yeah, I think that might be the most likely thing to come out of that. There's another house show on Wednesday, April 30th from Kumamoto. That's all preview tags, but it will be on World. And on Thursday, May 1st, Kagoshima. That one's not going to be on World. It's another house show. And from there, after that, we're into the 2 nights of Dontaku. So, which we will preview heavily next week. That's going to be the main point of next week's show is talk about all those and then preview Dontaku. So good stuff to come.
Yeah. Naito looked a bit rough in that elimination match, and the fact that he was in it for the majority of it was not great. They you had Yuya and Yoda eliminate each other on the way out and end up with Taichi and Naito in the Battle of the Old Dags in New Japan to finish it off. And then, they do a nice little speech about LIJ. They're all sitting in the corner appreciating each other, just kind of, taking it all in because, Green Day is at the time of your life. It could only be playing a couple more times.
I'll tell you one thing, though. Hiromu Takahashi is despondent right now over this.
Sure
he is really moping. And if you watch him in the post-match, not comments, although there too, but in the ring during that roll call, he is barely hanging on emotionally. Like, this is devastating to him that these guys are leaving, both Bushi and Naito, because he's been with these guys all along. This is the only faction he's ever really known. And these are tough times for Hiromu. He's wearing his heart on his sleeve right there, and he looks utterly depressed.
We're down to 4 guys in
I want to hug
LIJ.
him. I just want to give him a big hug.
I think so. 4 guys in LIJ.
Shingo said during his post-match comments on the Korakuen Hall show that the Dontaku tour would show the rest of LIJ what their future path will be.
That's ominous.
It is a little bit, isn't it? It made me curious.
That's comforting.
He said that, and like I said, Hiromu just looks depressed up there. But
did you see the email on the Tetsuya Naito final sale for all his merchandise?
No.
Yeah, we got the Bushi final sale and the Jeff Cobb final sale. I usually get those just because I'm interested to see how they do it. Kenny Omega shows up for a match. He's got a final sale through the end of the month. Like, they put the stuff on sale for the majority of the month. So, I don't think we've seen Naito the last time in New Japan this year, but he is the last time he's actively figured into the day-to-day plans.
I think he'll be back at some point, even if it's a freelancer. I think he'll be back in a New Japan ring, but I think it'll be a minute there. The other thing that's going on this weekend, Jeremy, is what could be a key moment as far as an IWGP title. IWGP women's title is going to be on the line in a key match and what could be the card of the year. Sunday is All-Star Grand Queendom for Stardom at the Yokohama Arena. And they're back in the Yokohama Arena. They're back in the big building there, and they have loaded this show. And I wanted to make mention of this because Scott Edwards, who is one of the key experts on Joshi wrestling, one of the very best at it, is part of the Fight Game Media Network. He will be hosting an All-Star Grand Queendom live review stream Sunday at 3:00 Eastern, right here on the Fight Game Media YouTube channel. And that will be, again, 3 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. All-Star Grand Queendom will be going on overnight. Just check your local listings as to what time it's happening. I believe it's something like 2 a.m. Eastern or something like that. But look it up. 2 a.m. Eastern is when that one's coming up. Just to look at this thing. Saya Kamitani versus Tama Nakano, career versus career, and the world title on the line. Loser retires.
That's Starlight, like a big deal.
The generational rivalry, Starlight Kid versus Azumi for the Wonder of Stardom title.
Also seems like a big deal.
It's a very big deal. And those two are finally moving from being the high-speed champion and the underneath titles to starting to headline the big shows. That's what they need. Mayu Iwatani versus Shuri for the IWGP Women's title. This could be the change. Scott Edwards still thinks that Iwatani might be on her way out of the company before too. A lot of people think that. It's not just Scott, that she might be on her way to join up with Rossi Ogawa and Marty Gold. And then, frankly, Jeremy, I think we are going to have the best tag team match of 2025 on this show. Wingori, that's Saya Ida and Hanan taking on Koguma and Hazuki for the Goddesses of Stardom tag team titles. For my money, these are two of the 4 best tag teams on planet Earth, not in Joshi, in pro wrestling. Micah and Chichiro Hashimoto for the Sendai Girls title. We're getting the Sendai Girls world title on this one. Hina and Rani Yagani for the future of Stardom. We got a grudge match, Suzu Suzuki and Mei Sarah. Tekla versus Sayaka Carrara. Listen to this stipulation here, Jeremy. This is wacky. If Tekla loses, she has to join the Cosmic Angels. If Tekla wins, she gets a match with Taro Okada, the president and booker of Stardom.
She joined the Cosmic Angels, didn't she?
Yeah, I don't know, but Taro Okada took a spear from Clark Connors in Vegas, so you never know. And then Mako Satomura. Oh yeah, he did. Mako Satomura is going to be on the card, so this is just a huge show, and I'm into it. I think Stardom's been on fire recently. I'm really excited about this show, and so the big weekend again for wrestling and the Bushi Road company all around here. So a lot going on.
I made it to a grand total of 4 matches. Live in Vegas.
You were there all the Colin Matthew asked earlier, how many shows did you guys watch over Mania weekend?
Okay, I watched a lot, but I only made it to 4.
4. And you went to the DDT show, right?
I went to the DDT show, and then I got called away for business stuff that I had to do at about 4:00, which was an hour after the show started. And I saw part of the Nick Wayne 6-man match when he flew back from Boston the night before from winning the ROH title. And I walked in with the ROH title. I was like, pretty impressive.
There you have it. Those were the 4 matches that you saw then?
No, that was the last of the 4 matches. I was hoping I was going to catch Takeshita versus Mao, but smartly, DDT made that the main event of the show. Apparently, Minoru Suzuki versus a blow-up doll was better than Minoru Suzuki versus Butterbean the night before.
Ooh, yeah, I had to put money on the blow-up doll.
I heard the Butterbean match when I was listening to Brian and Vinny live. Rip that one apart. When I had arrived in Vegas on Thursday night, they were ripping that one apart in the other room. And anyway, but I only saw 4, but I watched Dynamite before I left. I watched Collision at the airport. I watched SmackDown before I fell asleep at like 2 a.m. on Friday night. I caught all of NXT before WrestleMania. And then I watched WrestleMania. I did watch New Japan, I think Saturday morning. And then I watched night 2 of Mania when I did in the watch party. And then I did a couple recordings with Garrett Gonzalez for the Fight Game podcast. And then I just did a bunch of work for the Figure 4 website, basically just kind of being a guy on the ground, getting stuff done.
Yeah, and I did see Collins asked, did I see Senka body slam Aja? Yeah, I did. And she went up for it. Aja doesn't get slammed by a lot of people, but she gave one up to Senka. And Suzuki versus Yoshihiko was great, according to Colin. Well, Butterbean. I got a story about Butterbean real quick from when he was in boxing.
Let's do the Butterbean talk.
So he did those tough guy championships, which is how he got over, right? Remember tough guys like the semi-pro boxing stuff they used to do, and it was just like one night tournaments in bars and crap like that. That's where they found Butterbean. And then just his look and his this big tubby guy with a bald head and things, and then Butterbean became like a pay-per-view undercard draw. You didn't buy the pay-per-view for Butterbean, but he was an entertaining guy on the show. Mm-hmm. All the boxing purists couldn't stand this guy because he had no skill. I mean, he would just wind up and throw haymakers, and they just put him in with the worst guys they could find. Yeah, for him to hit in the head, then because he was almost unskilled, so they had to find completely unskilled people for him to beat. And one time, Butterbean got upset, like a guy beat Butterbean on a big show, and the analyst just said, "Well, they scoured the world for someone Butterbean could beat and couldn't find anybody," which I thought was really fun. Like they had looked all over the world for a boxer that Butterbean could actually defeat. And they couldn't find a single guy.
Apparently, Butterbean went into the match with a broken leg.
What?
Yeah, that's how bad this thing was, man. It was watching them rip this thing apart in live. It was just like me eating a sandwich in the other room. It was like, this is quite an experience I'm having right now.
Is there a streaming service in which you can catch this modern masterpiece of professional wrestling?
I think it's all on Triller.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I don't know. I know it was one of the DDT or one of the GCW shows. GCW was running at the Palms the entire weekend, and they had about 10 shows there. And then there were a couple other shows going on with WrestleCon and a couple other things. And, I saw Ric Flair in the Hotel of the Palms. He did not look like he was in good shape whatsoever. I kind of felt bad for him. And then I saw Javon Evans. And then a moment later, he looked like he was loving life on his 21st birthday in Vegas the night before his NXT pay-per-view. And then I saw Oba Femi trying to find the Wicked Spoon. And I almost...
Wicked Spoon's great.
I did go to the Wicked Spoon on Sunday morning, and it was pretty much tremendous. I really enjoyed the crab legs on this trip.
That's one of the best buffets. There aren't very many buffets left in Vegas, but that's one of the best ones.
No, they were bringing them back. Like I started to notice a few more buffets. It's like Vegas did not seem exceptionally busy this trip, and I don't know if it was because it was Easter or it was because of tourism being down or whatever. But there were no issues getting anywhere, doing anything, getting a taxi, no congestion. It was smooth getting everywhere that you needed to be on the weekend. And based off of being there 2023 for Double or Nothing, it was awful around the F1 when they were doing the Formula One racing and the traffic. And it was just bad. And I wasn't enthusiastic about Vegas as a result. I didn't do any gambling. I didn't do anything like that. But I actually had a really good time, and I want to shout out a couple of guys. There's Thomas and I believe Steven and Dakota and Dalen, all guys that were associated with the watch party and the F4W, and made time to get to know them, get to know me, and just wanted to give them a shout out because they were good dudes. And then, spent an Airbnb weekend with Brian Alvarez and Garrett Gonzalez and made Dave Meltzer breakfast one morning.
Oh, look at that. Sure, sweetheart.
Scrambled eggs, guys. Just scrambled eggs.
As I was going through the weekend, I got the All Japan service because I need another streaming service in my life because it's Champion Carnival time. So I've been watching a lot of the All Japan Champion Carnival. That's a lot of my attention has been, and on Stardom as well and things. The top contenders for that, Davey Boy Smith Jr., Kento Miyahara, Jun Saito, all that stuff. And I've been watching these shows. All Japan doesn't have the depth that New Japan does, but there are some good wrestlers there. And, man, Kento Miyahara, he's got to be the best Japanese wrestler who's not in New Japan right now. And I say that because Takeshita is partially in New Japan. But after that, Kento Miyahara, man, this guy is so good, and he's so ridiculously charismatic, and so much more charismatic than anybody else on the All Japan roster. That he just shines like crazy compared to the rest of that roster. It's pretty startling, and I understand why they have taken care of him, and I guess I understand why he hasn't left, because he's not a big fish in a little pond. He's a whale in a bathtub in that company. And Jun Saito currently has the Triple Crown, and he and his brother Rei Saito, or the Saito brothers, it's a charismatic tag team. Jun is a lot better in the ring than Rei is. Jun's pretty good. Ray's a good tag team wrestler, but as a singles wrestler, he's just okay. Jun's pretty good. And there are a few others that are pretty good too. There's a guy there I wanted to mention, Ren Ayabe. Ren Ayabe is this guy. He's tall. He's abnormally tall for certainly, I think, just looking at him in relation to the top rope than most Japanese wrestlers. And this guy, Jeremy, has an Okada complex that you just want to kind of shake him out of, because he comes out in the long multicolored coat. He has the Okada tights, the they're like shorts, multicolored. His hair's bleached blonde. He just looks like he's cosplaying Okada. He looks like he has gone to Wrestle Kingdom dressed as Okada. And this dude, and this dude is not Kazuchika Okada at all. And he's kind of skinny, and it just that's the one thing I was like, dude, you come on, now you got to change your gimmick up a little bit, because he isn't terrible, but I'm almost a little embarrassed for him. Like everybody knows, everybody sees what's going on here. Everybody sees you're trying to do Okada, and you're not Okada. They have a Hideki Suzuki, who is not Minoru Suzuki, but he's a wrestler. He's got cauliflower ears. He doesn't wear knee pads. He comes out in just the trunks and the traditional wrestling boots, and he tries to submit people and all that. So there are a couple of things that are on the New Japan roster, or the All Japan roster, that are almost tribute acts to other guys, which is not a path I would suggest taking right there. But so anyway, that's what I've been seeing from. But I'm going to a night of the Triple Crown while I'm in Japan. I'm going to a Stardom show at Korakuen. So I've been focusing on those two promotions outside of New Japan, because I'm going to be seeing them live in the next couple of weeks.
You totally reminded me, one of the matches that I saw in that in the DDT show had a guy named Shota in it, and Shota is from DDT, and he's got the old like Shota bleach blonde hair. And he looks like Shota Umino, except he's like 3 inches shorter and like 20 pounds lighter. But I nearly spit out my drink when I saw this guy named Shota come out, and I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. And I tried to grab the photo and put it on here real quick, but it was an invalid photo type. It made me laugh. But man, there was some naked copies of that. And I was with my buddy Miguel, and he tried to like play it off. He's like, oh, that's fine. I'm like, no. We know what this guy is doing.
By the way, Jeremy, you asked earlier, was there anything good from those last two Dontaku shows? And yeah, the funny thing is, like those LIJ clashes with the Hantai Just 4 Guys stuff. Again, we only saw highlights because they didn't put them on NJPW World. But Tsuji and Uemura, I think, is going to be great. Shingo and Umino will at least be interesting. And just that whole clash between that group and LIJ, I think it's actually been pretty strong in-ring stuff. Hiromu is still a good wrestler when he wants to be. He's a little more storyline motivated, and right now he's just a little depressed. And Naito, like you mentioned, Taichi and Naito both had some rough spots in that match at Korakuen Hall, and they both played it off a little bit afterwards. Like, well, see, we're not used to being up at 11:30 in the morning doing this. Like these whole matinee shows, you got to put us on at night. We're not awake yet. We're and like THE is like, we're old guys. We don't get up this early too much. Which it's funny. The older I get, the earlier I wake up, no matter what.
I wake up very early all the time.
Well, you do, yeah.
It's unbelievable. I got one last question for you today, Steven.
Okay, and I do. Hey, Scott, there's Scott Edwards. He's going to be hosting that live stream. Glad you're here.
Let's plug that thing one more time now that he's here.
Make sure he hears it. He's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern time, the live stream for All-Star Grand Queendom Review. So watch what could be the show of the year.
In the middle of the stream to not contribute anything whatsoever.
No, we plugged it earlier too, Scott. We're on it, but we're excited about it. So, Jeremy, what else is on your mind here? Because we want to talk about this whole AAA acquisition.
That's what I wanted to
Jeff
talk to you about. Like AAA was bought by WWE, okay? But AAA doesn't do any business with New Japan Pro Wrestling. No. However, there are ramifications of AAA being acquired by WWE, and I wanted to talk to you about your thoughts of what you think is going to happen from here.
I believe that they bought AAA because they want to establish a talent pipeline in Mexico. Mm-hmm. They want to establish a talent pipeline in the United States through the ID program.
Mexico.
And why not?
NXT Mexico.
I don't know if they're going to do that. I mean, I think there is value. The AAA name still means a little bit of something in Mexico. Not what it did. When Triple H was first formed, it was a bunch of guys basically from CMLL who broke away and started their own thing. Antonio Pena was in on it. And
traditional Lucha Libre company, that AAA.
Well, yeah, for a while, it was the hottest company in the world. 1994, I think AAA was probably the hottest company on earth. And they had some incredible stuff there. I mean, they're doing a Worlds Collide pay-per-view with NXT. Worlds Collide is a mythical Lucha Libre pay-per-view from 1994, which saw some of the best action you will ever see. If you can find Worlds Collide, my God, go get it. It's great. Right. And they had a run. I mean, Rey Mysterio became a star with AAA. So did Psychosis, Juventud Guerrera, Eddie Guerrero with Art Barr, Gringos Locos, Conan. And they had established guys, the original Dinamitas, Hermanos Dinamitas, the Paraguayo. Well, anyway, it had a run. And then it ran into a lot of trouble over the years, had its ups and downs. And really, since the patriarch there passed away, it hasn't been what it was. And the family was kind of looking to sell. With that in mind, WWE went and bought it. There could be value in running it as AAA and just making it a feeder system. WWE seems to be developing a strategy to dominate the pipeline of talent so that they can get the young talent and maybe share it with TNA and maybe keep AEW from getting much of any of it in long-term strategy here. What does that mean for Japan? Years ago, WWE tried to buy Pro Wrestling Noah. They were turned down. Another thing that Triple H wanted to do when he was in charge of NXT was create NXTs around the world. They had NXT UK. Pandemic shot it in the head, unfortunately. It was successful up until the doggone pandemic, and then it never really quite regained its footing. They had plans to create some sort of NXT in Japan. I'd imagine that Mexico was probably on their minds as well. And I think that the fact that this When Worlds Collide pay-per-view is being branded as AAA NXT shows you the level they're considering this stuff at. Vikingo was at WrestleMania and all that. They're considering this kind of like an NXT type of level, not not a forbidden door where the companies try to pretend that they're equals.
Right.
So with that in mind, I heard some people just worry that, are they going to try to buy New Japan? They might try. It's possible. But
they'll probably try Noah first again.
That's kind of what I was saying, is that I think that there other companies need to be a little bit more worried. All Japan should probably be, the fans of All Japan should probably be sweating a little bit, because the All Japan level is about right. The idea of taking a company that has 1,000 people a show, a couple of thousand for the big shows, that feels about right for an NXT type of thing, a place to try to get young talent and get them reps. And Scott is trying to pretend they're equals. You know it's true. The Forbidden Door is not about two equal companies. Never has been. All Japan would be about the right style there. A place where guys can get reps. The company has a name. Noah is another one, although Noah is owned by a company that I think has more money than Bushiroad does. So the scary thing for New Japan would be, the point of concern would be, if Bushiroad, which is a game manufacturing company, they develop apps for mobile phones, They make trading card games. They don't do Pokemon, but stuff like that, where you collect cards, and that's their base. If they ran into any kind of trouble and they just said, you know what, let's just focus on what we do and get ourselves back here so we can spin off New Japan. It was nice to have for a while. We can sell it off, big infusion of cash, and we can focus on our core business. I looked up Bushiroad's stock price on the Nikkei, which is the Japanese stock market. It's actually up a lot in the last year. It had some rough quarters. Bushiroad had some rough quarters. And there were questions about its leadership and things. And it's still, but right now the stock is rated a strong buy. And it's on the way up, having a strong year. Stock price is not the only factor involved in whether a company is doing well, but it's not a bad one. And right now, with the stock price rising, things are at least looking up within Bushiroad in that direction. That would be my concern. If Bushiroad ever just thought we need an infusion of cash and maybe we just need to focus on our core business. Noah is also owned by a really big company. So again, you'd have to kind of make them an offer they can't refuse. WWE could, but they might not have to. There are all these companies like, DDT, but Big Japan, All Japan, a place where they run about 1,000 people at a time, and they can stockpile it with young wrestlers. And then you have the young guys from Japan coming over to the WWE eventually. That seems to be more along the lines of what they were planning to do. And now the Triple H is in charge of the big company, what he might be doing. So I'm less concerned as a New Japan fan than I would be if I were a fan of a mid-level promotion. Does that make sense, Jeremy? And how are you feeling about this after the acquisition of a Triple A?
I never really looked at anything other than the rating of other talent in Mexico could cause problems for CMLL's talent going over to New Japan. That was the primary predictive after everything you've covered in the first place. Because there's nothing more to really add. Like, it's a clinical analysis, right? We've got tons of 40 years of history. We've got NXT UK. We've got all the things the WWE has been planning on doing, including a savvy business mind with Nick Khan and Triple H on how they want to, spread their outreach around the world. Right now, we have battlegrounds with the wrestling promotions. Mexico's a battleground. WWE gets AAA. AEW gets CMLL. It's like Noah is aligned with WWE. New Japan is aligned with AEW. It's happening everywhere. And it's fine. It's like these dividing lines are going to be drawn, and these smaller promotions are going to suffer if they don't have, alliances with the bigger promotion with money to spend. Just the way the world works. WWE is going to try and rate CMLL. It's a virtual certainty.
That's really hard to do, though, because CMLL is...
Hear me out. All right. They're going to try. The natural defense that CMLL has is guys like Mystico who have been there, who have been like, no way am I going back and falling for like that all over again. The money deals have to be great. They have to see that like they are top heavy already in WWE with Hispanic talent. It's like you got the Penta, you got the Phoenix, you got the Stephanie Vecchio, you got Andrade, you got the LWO, you got Rey Mysterio. Like they are lining, they're Santos Escobar. They're all there. They're like they have like filed the ranks with luchadors and rudos and all this stuff already. So they're finding the 3 or 4 guys that they're gonna create up next. It's not the entire roster that's going there. 13 WWE ID talents that right now that they're marking on there. In my mind, do I really think that Alberto, Psycho Clown, Vampiro are going to WWE? I really don't. No. Like it's Vikingo and it's guys like that.
It's like Vikingo if he can stay healthy for 20 minutes.
Right,
Vikingo for sure.
Right. And it's like, and people are worried about Stephanie Vecchio, and you know the story about Stephanie Vecchio and Quattrero, right?
Well, yeah, but he's in jail.
He's out on bail. He's actually out on bail now. But he was a AAA talent. and Stephanie Vaquer with CMLL, and she is working for WWE. So there's a lot of people that expressed concern about Stephanie Vaquer, who's appeared on New Japan Pro Wrestling a number of times before she signed with WWE, that she is going to be placed in a position where she could be subject to abuse from people in that promotion. And in my mind, I don't even see that happening. Like,
no.
She has so much more clout and power over any of the 13 people combined. The 13 people that they're going to bring over are going to be of less value to WWE right now than Stephanie Vaquer is. And her stock is rising.
Yeah, the whole thing, though, the rating CMLL is a real challenge because being a top star in CMLL is different than being a top star for any other company. And in that, you're home all the time, for one thing, because most of your shows are in Metro Mexico City. There's a lot less travel, and you're still in front of huge crowds. Yes, WWE can offer more money, but it's a tougher lifestyle. And so it's not so easy to just kind of snatch them up. Well, they've done it before. People have left CMLL and gone to WWE, but not many. If you look, not very many, especially top guys. And so a few have, but not all that many. I still think this is just more about creating a farm system. And I think they want a farm system in Japan. So that would be my worry. Buying New Japan is ambitious. There are also, by the way, worth mentioning, rules and regulations and red tape about foreign companies buying Japanese companies that you don't run into in other countries. It's much easier for a Japanese company to buy an American company in the United States than it is for an American company to buy a Japanese company. A lot more red tape, a lot more hurdles to clear. Not impossible, especially if both sides are willing. Hostile takeovers are incredibly difficult. But if the company in Japan wants to sell and the company in the United States wants to buy, it can be worked out, but it's still not easy. And it takes a lot of time. So, it's a matter of just what would it be worth to them. I don't think WWE is that interested in running New Japan and tours in expensive places like the Dome and Edion Arena. I think they would be very interested in having a training system so that the young talent in Japan ends up with them and not with other people.
So I think there's not much else to say.
And Benkin mentions that WWE has tried for years to get in Japan.
Right.
Yep, we sure have, which is why I think this Mexico thing worked out well. Part of it is timing. AAA wanted to sell. The owners of AAA wanted out. And they know that they can't compete with CMLL. They don't have the talent. They don't have the infrastructure right now, and don't have the will. This isn't the current owners of AAA. It's not their baby. It was their parents, and it's not their thing.
How did you find out this news, and what was your reaction?
What, that they bought AAA?
Yeah,
I think I saw it on. I don't really remember. I think I just saw it on. I don't remember how I heard about it. I didn't hear about it on the pre-show because I didn't watch it.
Okay.
Is where they announced it. I must have heard about it from one of the websites, probably Fightful or whatever it was. Yeah.
So I literally had the pre-show up at the Cosmo Elite party because nobody was there yet. And, I'm looking up and I see all the AAA talent. I see Ray on the screen. I see, Penta and Stephanie and Vikingo, and I say, oh, they're doing a Worlds Collide. That's cool, June, whatever. Like, that seems like weird WrestleMania news. And I get back to prepping the suite for food and ice and going back and forth. And somebody else comes in and like, did you hear that AAA was bought by WWE? It's like, no, I saw that they were doing a Worlds Collide. What are you talking about? Because I was looking up and looking down and looking like, they bought AAA. I'm like, they did what?
Yeah, probably got it for peanuts too. Probably got it for peanuts. I think they just wanted out.
We had a question on the Fight Game podcast of what was going to win the weekend, and this came close. The AAA, but I think when all said and done, I think Seth Rollins might have won the weekend.
Oh yeah. Oh, I see what you mean. Like who came out of it the best?
Like what WWE news on the Fight Game podcast, or what out of WrestleMania is going to win the weekend, and people are going to talk about it afterwards. I didn't really think The Rock was going to win the weekend and not be there, but here we are.
If it turns out to be a match, I think Gunther might have when he put Pat McAfee to sleep on Raw. Because imagine having the Pat McAfee show plug your match. If he does a match with Pat McAfee, that's going to get Gunther in front of
McAfee.
That is going to get Gunther in front of a lot of people.
What do you think, SummerSlam? Before McAfee heads off for college football again?
That's a great idea because in SummerSlam, it's a 2-night event. They're going to need big stuff, and they're going to need a lot of promotion behind it, and McAfee can provide that for whatever reason.
That's probably
I don't mind McAfee as a wrestling announcer. He's not my favorite, but he's not.
He's worse when he's not locked in, and he's not been locked in for a while.
But the idea of having that kind of, a lot of people listen to him, that kind of promotional machine behind your match, he might end up winning this thing. But
good.
To answer Jeremy Orr's question, could New Japan combine with other Japanese wrestling companies? They could. They could if they wanted to. Right now, I don't feel like they don't feel like they need to. I think they already have guests come in. Like we're getting Mao from DDT. They're kind of sharing Takeshita with DDT, although pretty much everybody thinks as soon as his deal with AEW and DDT is over, he's going to be a New Japan guy, which is what he's always wanted to be. But they could, and they have that Pro Wrestling Alliance. It's basically a lobbying group. They can do charity shows with those other guys. They could, absolutely, they could combine with some others, and they have the money to buy others if they wanted to. I just don't think there's a whole lot of incentive to right now, when a lot of times these guys can kind of go to America for a year and then come into New Japan. You know, they kind of get the guys they want anyway. Jake Lee, although, you know, he got hurt right away, but you didn't know that. And then, you know, Takeshita, Shingo was the biggest star of Dragon Gate for a long time. They got him. You know, they tend to get the guy they want.
Even more to that, like New Japan's not swimming in money. They're doing okay. You know, it's like it's not a crazy great year. It hasn't been a crazy great few years. You know, they just couldn't come to terms with Naito on like money and dates and all that. Taking on, absorbing another company into yours or combining with another company, that costs a lot of money. You know, it's like you got to be in a good financial position to do that. And I just don't think New Japan is in that position right now.
So for full stuff on the Bushiroad thing, I looked it up very quickly. Bushiroad, over the last 5 years, the stock is down 30%. So it took a hit, but up almost 50%, 47% in the last 12 months. So it dipped, and now it seems to be working its way in the correct direction. Colin mentioned, apart from EO and to a certain extent Takeshita, the big two American companies don't know how to book their Japanese talent. That has been a struggle, hasn't it? That has indeed been a struggle. So, but you know, hey,
I feel like you're getting as much out of Ishii as you can right now in AEW. I wish he would win a little bit more, but he's getting paid to do like work, and he's got the cachet to make money and not work that hard over there. And I think he's probably being booked about what he should be, given his stage of his career.
Considering it's been 9 years, and during any 9-year career, there will be ups and downs. I think they've done okay with Asuka when they've had her. Okay. Sure. Not perfect, but I mean, she's been a major
world champion.
Major matches at WrestleMania. So I think they've done all right with her. And signs are good early for Julia, I think they know what they have with her. And then,
I would say if I had to put stock in somebody, I'd put more stock in Stephanie than Julia right now, but it's close.
Well, I think they're more interested in the Latin American market too, but
I agree.
Just on pure talent, Stephanie's fantastic. So I'm not arguing. Fernando mentions, do you think there will be a scenario in 10 years WWE will ever buy New Japan? Could be. And like I said, if Bushiroad gets into trouble and decide they want out of the wrestling business, that could
I think a no is more likely than a yes in that situation, but a no is not a guarantee.
Yeah. And then, Venkin says it's quite true. Tony, when he needs a title match, will just call Yuka, Riho, or Shida for 3 weeks and make them win a few and then lose to the champ. Yeah, they do have those guys put them over. And Okada is a disaster in AEW from Jeremy. I'll tell you what, Okada is probably the smartest guy in that locker room, because he is doing nothing and taking that check for doing what he's doing right now. He's a hell of a lot smarter than the guy right now.
7 figures for 2 good matches a year.
Yeah, I mean, he has absolutely realized where he is and what he's doing, and he has sat down on that contract, and I think that's probably the smartest thing.
There's a part of me that thinks that he kind of needs to, that his body's probably pretty wrecked, and he's only got a couple matches in him a year. But good on him for finding the situation. Even if the fans aren't getting the best of what they wanted out of Okada, like, Okada's going to have a few years here where he may actually be able to heal his body if possible and, elongate his career.
Franken says he'll only try against Ospreay. I'll bet he tries against Kenny in Texas. I think he will.
Yeah, you think that Omega and Okada at All In
I'm hoping.
Might be a work rate match?
I'm thinking about making the drive up there for that show.
No. You're finally talking yourself into this one?
Yeah.
You and Kevin Ely both, man. You're both like, I don't know about this one.
I need to see the lineup before I go all the way. Dallas is 3.5. I'm in Texas, but that's 3.5 hours away. That's a long trip. And going up to the Metroplex is not easy. So it's they got to entice me. I need to see something out of it. If I get Kenny and Okada and they're actually going to try, that would go a long way. That would go a long way toward it. But we'll see. That card's coming together and all that. So maybe, I don't know.
I pretty much exhausted my goodwill between this and potentially going to Japan next year. So I'm gonna count my desk. So what week are you gone for the show? 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks?
Yeah, I'm flying out the day of the second night of Dontaku. So I'm flying out the 4th, and then I will be back the 17th, I think.
All right, Scott, you heard that. You're showing up for these shows. The one after Dontaku. So like
Scott says he went to Scott went to the Spring Breakthrough show, and he says it worked out.
Those are good shows.
Yeah.
Dynamite and Collision have been all right shows lately. It's like when you have good talent like Kevin Knight and the Young Bucks and Okada and Ospreay and Swerve, when you're and the Hurt guys, when you're putting those guys on the show, turns out it's a pretty good show.
Yeah, I got my tickets to the Yomiuri Giants. By the way, I'm going to go to a Pacific League baseball game there, a Japanese league game. It was the Giants. We are sitting about as far back as you can get. We're like way back in the outfield and only a couple rows from the top. But I am thrilled that I'm going to be able to see a Japanese League baseball game while I'm out there too. So I got that. I got 2 pro wrestling shows. I've got Grand Sumo, Colin. I'm going to be Onosato. I'm going to get a towel or something. And I'm going to be enjoying that. So plenty of wrestling in various forms in baseball. I'm going to just immerse myself in Japanese culture for a couple of weeks. I'm going to miss being here on this show, but I will be here next week when we preview Dontaku. But I'm going to have to catch, I think, the second day of Dontaku, probably, maybe on the plane if they have Wi-Fi. If not, then once I get to Tokyo. And then Resurgence I'm going to have to catch in Japan as well, oddly enough. Yeah, I'm down with the diehards in the outfield. Absolutely, yeah. I'm going to be.
Hello, Sean.
Someone's going to have to hit a moonshot for me to get a ball out my way for that one. That's I am a long way off. Basically, I am sitting on top of the set for Wrestle Kingdom. That's really where I am. I'm going to be up higher than that. So,
hey, turns out that Pete Crow Armstrong guy is good at baseball.
I'm very happy. We got 2 from the Dodgers. We beat the Dodgers 4 out of the 7 games we played them, and thank goodness we're rid of those guys for the season now. God, those guys are terrors. My goodness, every time we got a lead, they would hit. Oh God, I don't want any more of the Dodgers. Don't want any more of the Dodgers.
You want to doy them? Dodge them?
Your Giants can have them. It's your problem now.
Oh man, Giants are playing good baseball. Happy about that.
All right, are we wrapping this one up for the week?
You wrap it up. I'll put up the graphic. We'll call it a day.
All right. So with that in mind, I want to thank everybody for sticking with us here this week as we talked about some unsavory things, but we had to. We felt like we did, but I think we covered all the necessary moments going on in pro wrestling. Have some fun this week. Watch these really good New Japan shows. Catch All-Star Grand Queendom. There's going to be good stuff.
Act like adults.
And don't forget Scott's live stream here. Power Bombshells on Sunday. The Dynamite show on Wednesdays. They watch, so you don't have to. And with that in mind, with all that, for Jeremy Finestone, I'm Steven Conway. Thank you for listening to Speaking of Strong Style and joining us here live on YouTube or on a podcast. We appreciate your time, and we will talk to you again real soon.